Good morning, everyone. Um, when we learn about the Great Depression through a crash course video that I'm going to assign after the weekend, he talks about that one of the big causes of the Great Depression then was that the banks failed. Now, wait a second. A bank, a place where you open a checking or savings account, how do they fail? They only have so much money in them. And the money that people deposit, they hold about a tenth of it, and then they lend the other parts out. And that's how banks make themselves money, but also make money in the world. That they're kind of holding on to your money, but they're lending it to businesses and using it for people who will create more money. Now, we have what's called the Federal Reserve now. So if everybody were to show up at the bank and say, I want my money, the Federal Reserve would give them the money that they have written down, but not necessarily in their hand. Back then, they didn't do that. So people showed to take out their money, and they took all the money out of the banks, and the banks didn't have enough money, and they closed and just went out of business, and people lost their money, and it was an ugly scene. So that is a typical scene of the Great Depression of 1929 through 1940. And apparently the Great Depression didn't really start taking off until the 1931, was the banks failed. So I hope I explained that a little bit. Okay, chapter 6. I'm going to roll into 6 and 7, I think. Uh-oh. My eyes opened, and I could see the sun beyond the branch of a Christmas tree. I jumped up. I folded my blanket, and I put it in my suitcase. I hit it, and I started running 6 or 7 blocks down to the mission. I turned the corner. Phew, there are people still lined up waiting. I started walking along the line. The end was a lot further away than I thought. The line turned all the way around 2 corners, crossed over 1 street. I saw the last person. I walked in line to get them. He said, "Hey, line's closed. These folks here are the last ones," pointing to a man standing next to a woman who was carrying a baby. But sir, nothing. Line's closed. These folks are the last ones. It was time to start lying. If I don't get food now, I'll have to steal something out of someone's garbage, or I wouldn't be able to eat until the mission opened for dinner late tonight. Sir, the man raised his hand. Look, kid, everybody's got a story and everybody knows the rules. The line closes at 7 o'clock. How's it fair to these people who've been here since 5 o'clock that you can sleep in until, he looked at his wristwatch, 7:15? Then busting down here expecting to eat, you think because you got some kind of special privileges because you're skinny and raggedy? Look, the line here, there's lots of folks just like you, and you ain't the worst. Supper starts at 6 o'clock tonight. But seeing how things is, if you plan on getting fed, you better be in line by 4. Now get out of here before I get rough with you. Shucks, being hungry the whole day is about as bad as it can get. But he reached in his pocket and he pulled out something that looked like a heavy black strap. And he slapped it across his hand. Uh-oh, here we go again. That's it. No more talk. You open your mouth one time too many. You rotten kids, don't listen to me no more. I'm going to show you something. He slapped the strap on his hand and started walking towards me. I was wrong when I said being hungry for a day was as bad as it can get. Being hungry plus having a big knot on your head from a black leather strap would be worse. I backed away but only got 2 steps before I felt a giant warm hand wrap around my neck from behind. I looked up to see whose doggone hand was so doggone big. A very tall, square man in blue overalls looked down at me and says, "Clarence, what took you so long?" I got ready to say, "My name's not Clarence, and please don't chuck me, sir, I'll leave." But as soon as I opened my mouth, he gave my head a shake and said, "I told you to hurry back. Now, where you been?" He gave me a shove. "Now, get back in line with your mama." I looked up and down the line to see who was supposed to be my mama. When a woman pointed her finger at her feet and said, "Clarence, you get over here right now." There were 2 little kids hanging onto her feet. I'm sorry. I walked over to where she was, and she gave me a good hard smack on the head. Shucks, for someone who was just pretending to be my mama, she slapped me pretty good. I said, "Ow!" The big square man who grabbed my neck looked at the man with the strap and said, "Boy had got to use the crapper. I told him, don't waste time. Like you said, these kids don't listen to nobody." The strap man looked at the size of the man who called me Clarence, and he walked back to the end of the line. When the overall man got back in line, I said, "Thank you, sir. I really tried to get," but he popped me in the back of the head hard and said, "Next time, don't be gone so long." The two little kids busted out laughing, saying, yeah, 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 Clarence got a licking, Clarence got a licking. I told them, shut up and don't call me. Then both my pretend papa and pretend mama smacked me on the head. She looked at the people direct behind and said, mercy, when they get to be this age. The people weren't too happy about me taking cuts in line, but when they looked at how big my pretend daddy was, and they saw how hard my pretend mama was going upside my head, they didn't say anything. I was grateful to these people, but I wish they'd quit popping me in the head. And it seems like all the names in the world could have come up with a better one for me than Clarence. I stood in line with my pretend family for a very long time. Everybody was quiet about standing in line, even my pretend brother and sister. When we finally got around the last corner and could see the door, folks in line seen a bubble busted and they started laughing and talking. It showed the main thing was they were talking about a great big sign that was hanging over the building. It showed a picture of a family of 4 rich people sitting in a car driving somewhere. You could tell it was a family because they all looked exactly alike. The only difference amongst them was that the daddy had a big head and a hat, and the mama had a big head with a woman's hat, and the girl had 2 pigtails coming out from above her ears and had shiny teeth and shiny eyes and shiny cheeks and shiny smiles. You didn't need to squint your eyes at that shiny. You would need to squint if that shiny family drove anywhere near you. You could tell they were rich because their car had room for 8 or 9 people, and they had movie star clothes on. The woman would wear a coat of a hunk of fur around the neck, and the man was wearing a suit and tie. And the sign said that they were pictured on, there's no place like America today. My daddy read it and said, oh, well, we got to give them credit. You wouldn't expect they'd have the nerve to come down here and tell the truth, would you? When we finally got into the building, it was worth the wait. The first thing you noticed was how big the place was. The only sound you could hear was when someone scraped a spoon across the bottom of their bowl. After we'd picked up our spoons and bowls, a lady dug a big mess of oatmeal out of a giant pot and swooped it into our bowls. I hope you enjoy. Me and my pretend family all said, thank you, ma'am. The man put 2 pieces of bread, an apple, and a big glass of milk on your tray and said, please read the signs to your children. Thank you, sir. One said, please don't smoke. Please eat quickly and quietly as possible. Please be considerate and patient. Clean up after yourself. Your neighbors will be eating after you. And one said, we are terribly sorry, but we have no work available. My pretend daddy read the signs to my pretend brother and sister, and we all sat with strangers on both sides of us. The oatmeal was delicious. I poured some of my milk into it so it wouldn't be so lumpy. My pretend mother opened her pocketbook and took out a brown envelope. She sprinkled something on my pretend brother's oatmeal and said, I know it's not as much as you normally get, but I want to ask if you would share some with Clarence. They pouted and they gave me dirty looks. My pretend mother said, good. She emptied the rest of my oatmeal. It was brown sugar. Shucks, I didn't even mind them calling me Clarence anymore. Thank you, Mama. She and my pretend daddy laughed, and it took you long enough to catch on, Clarence. He acted like he wasn't going to smack me again. After we finished all our food and put our bowls up, I thanked my pretend family. Are you going to be coming back for supper? No, dear. We only come here in the mornings. But you make sure you get here plenty early. Yes, Mama. Ma'am. I watched them walking away. My pretend brother looked back at me and stuck out his tongue. Then he reached up and took my pretend mama's hand. I couldn't blame him. I don't think I'd be really happy about sharing my brown sugar with my folks and any strange kids either. Chapter 7. I pushed the heavy door open and walked into the library. The air in the library isn't like the air anywhere else. It's cooler than the outside, and it feels like you're walking into a cellar even on a hot July day. The next thing about the air in the library is no place smells anything like it. You close your eyes and try to pick it out, you're going to get confused. All the smells blended together and turned themselves into a different one. As soon as I got into the library, I closed my eyes and I took a deep breath. I got a whiff of the leather on old books, a smell that got really strong if you picked up one of them and stuck your nose real close to it when you turned the pages. There was the smell of cloth that covered the brand new books, the books that make a splitting sound when you open them. I think that smell makes so many people fall asleep in the library. You'll see someone turn a page, and you can imagine a puff of page powder coming up slow, and it starts putting your eyes down so they stay down a little longer after each blink, and then all of a sudden, they don't come back at all, and you're asleep. That's the part that gets the librarians mad, though. They get upset if people start drooling in the books, page powder or not. They don't want to hear any excuses. You've got to get out. Drooling in the books is worse than laughing in the library. And even though it might seem kind of mean, you can't blame the librarians for tossing drooly folks out. I opened my eyes to start looking for Miss Hill. She wasn't at the lending desk, so I left my briefcase with the lady there. I knew it'd be safe. I walked between the stacks to see if Miss Hill was putting up books. I went back up to the librarian at the lending desk. I waited, and she looked up at me. "Would you like to retrieve your suitcase?" "Not yet, ma'am. Can I ask you a question?" "Of course, young man. How can I help you?" "I'm looking for Miss Hill." "Oh, Miss Hill? Haven't you heard?" Uh-oh. That's number 16 of Bud Caldwell's Rules and Things for Having a Funner Life and Making a Better Liar Out of Yourself. And that's one of the worst ones. Rule number 16. If a grown-up ever starts a sentence by saying, "Haven't you heard?" get ready, because what's about to come out of their mouth is going to make you drop headfirst into a boiling tragedy. It seems like the answer to "haven't you heard" almost has something to do with someone kicking the bucket, maybe in a calm, peaceful way. Something like hearing that your grandmother got her whole body pushed through the wringer on a washing machine, or something about hearing a horse slipping on the ice or landing on some kid you went to school with. I said, "No, ma'am." And I got my stomach ready. "There's no need for you to look so stricken. It's not bad news." She laughed quietly. "Really, it's not bad news. Unless you were going to marry Miss Hill." I pretended I knew what she was talking about. "No, ma'am, I didn't plan that at all." She laughed. "Good, because I don't want her new husband would appreciate the competition. Miss Hill is currently living in Chicago, Illinois." "Husband? She got married?" "Oh, yes, and I must tell you, she's radiating happiness." "And she moved all the way to Chicago?" "That's right, but Chicago isn't far. I'll show you." She reached under her desk and pulled out a thick leather book called Atlas of the United States. "Here we are." She thumbed a book at me. It was a big map of Michigan, where we were, and I pointed to a couple of states next to it. Here. We're here in Flint, Michigan, and Chicago's over here in Illinois. They look pretty close, but I know tricky maps can be tricky. They put the whole world on a map and they go, "How long would it take to walk that far?" "Oh dear, quite a while. Let's check the distance." She reached under the desk and pulled out another one called Standard Mileage. She showed me that Chicago to Flint was 270 miles. Okay, this is how one figures out the time you would need to walk 270 miles. This is one of the bad things about talking to librarians. You ask one question and she already had us digging through 3 different books. It says the average human goes 5 miles an hour, assuming you covered 5 miles an hour and you divide it by 55 hours. That's much too long to be practical. Now I'm afraid you simply have to visit Mrs. Rollins, that's her new name, when she comes back to visit Flint. Chicago might as well be a million miles away, and Miss Hill might as well be a squashed, crunched up mess in a washing machine when it came to helping me now. I thanked the librarian for the bad news. Going to the home was out. It used to be we'd get a new kid every once in a while, but lately it seems like every couple of new kids every day. Mostly babies, and they're sick. It's not like when I first got there. Shucks, half the folks that run it don't even tell you their name and don't remember yours unless you're in trouble or getting ready to move out. After a while, I got my suitcase and walked in the regular air and the stinking smells of Flint, Michigan. That library door closing after a walkout was exactly the kind of door Mama had told me about. I knew that since it closed, the next one was about to open. I went back under my tree, and before I knew it, I was asleep. Okay, so that's the end of the chapter. On Monday morning, we'll pick up chapter 8 and the assignment of the video and more things. Hang in there. Be good. Do your deep meditation. Do some exercise. I'll talk to you guys soon.